Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to ancient Rome, not to the grand spectacle of the Colosseum or the clamorous Senate floor, but to the quieter, yet intensely charged world of a woman named Porcia Catonis. We're going to explore the quiet fortitude of this remarkable figure, the daughter of the famously unbending Cato the Younger, especially as the storm clouds of civil war and conspiracy gathered over her life. Imagine a young girl walking through cool stone corridors, the scent of laurel and old papyrus in the air, overhearing hushed conversations about virtue duty and a republic teetering on the brink. Honestly, growing up with Cato as your dad, you probably wouldn't survive the sheer weight of moral expectation. It's like having a live-in Stoic superhero who never ever takes off his cape of righteousness, not even for bath time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments below? It's always fascinating to see where everyone is winding down from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself a young Portia in a household where principles are not just discussed, but are the very pillars holding up the roof. Your father, Marcus Porcia Cato, often called Cato the Younger, is a man whose name is already becoming a byword for Roman integrity and an almost painfully rigorous adherence to Stoic philosophy. Born around 73 BCE, though historians still argue whether it was a year or two earlier or later. Your early life unfolds in the shadow of this colossal figure. This isn't the warm, fuzzy kind of shadow that offers gentle respite from the sun. It's the kind of shadow that demands you stand straighter, think clearer, and feel more deeply about the responsibilities that come with your name. The air in Cato's domus isn't thick with the scent of lavish perfumes or the raucous laughter of endless parties. Instead, it's imbued with the austerity he champions, a conscious rejection of the growing decadence of Rome. You might see him forego shoes, not out of poverty, but as a statement, or wear a toga of unbleached wool, deliberately plain, a quiet protest against the vibrant hues of senatorial vanity. It's like living with a historical reenactor who's deadly serious about his role. Only his role is conscience of the Republic. No pressure, kid. Your mother is Atilia, and though records of her are sparse, as they so often are for women of this era, her presence, or perhaps the social standing she brought, is part of your lineage. But it's Cato's influence that truly saturates your formative years. He doesn't just teach Stoicism. He is Stoicism in motion. You learn about virtue being the only good, about reason as your guide, and about emotional resilience in the face of whatever fate, or the increasingly chaotic Roman political scene, might throw your way. These aren't abstract lessons from a scroll. They're demonstrated daily in your father's unwavering opposition to men like Julius Caesar, whose ambition Cato sees as a dagger aimed at the heart of the Republic. Mainstream historical fact reminds us that Cato's integrity was so renowned that even his political adversaries grudgingly respected his incorruptibility. He was the man who couldn't be bought, the immovable object in a world of dangerously pliable politicians. Imagine the dinner conversations. Probably less about what happened at the ancient equivalent of soccer practice, and more about the moral decay of the senatorial class. You'd learn to ponder the nature of justice before you even mastered your multiplication tables, if Roman girls of your station even bothered with such mundane things beyond basic household arithmetic. The world outside your well-ordered, philosophically rigorous home is a swirling vortex of ambition alliances and betrayals. Your childhood coincides with the rise of the first triumvirate, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, a power block that your father openly despises and fights with every fiber of his being. The news that filters in, carried by serious-faced visitors or discussed in urgent low tones by your father and his allies, is of distant wars, political maneuvering, and the ever-present threat of civil unrest. It's a bit like trying to do your homework while your neighbors are having a very loud, very consequential argument involving swords and entire legions. This constant background hum of crisis undoubtedly shapes your understanding of Stoic principles. When your father speaks of enduring hardship without complaint, it's not a theoretical exercise. It's a practical guide to navigating a world where your family is on one side of a very deep, very dangerous political divide. You would learn that fortitude isn't just an abstract virtue. It's a survival tool. There's a quirky, though perhaps somber tidbit that some Stoics, in their quest for emotional detachment, even practiced imagining the loss of their loved ones to better prepare themselves for grief. One hopes Cato didn't assign that as homework for his young daughter, but the sentiment of preparing for the worst was certainly in the philosophical air you breathed. As a girl, even a high-born one, your formal education might be a point of gentle debate for us now. Historians still argue whether Portia and her female contemporaries received extensive formal schooling in rhetoric and philosophy, or if their learning was more domestic, absorbed through osmosis from the educated men around them. But in Cato's household, it's hard to imagine an intelligent child like you not soaking up the philosophical discourse. Perhaps you sit quietly in a corner, seemingly occupied with a doll or needlework, while philosophers visiting your father discuss Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus. You learn to parse complex arguments, to value logic, and to see the world through a framework that prizes duty above personal comfort. You might observe your father facing down political opponents in the forum, returning home, not with tales of triumphant power plays, but with reflections on whether he acted virtuously, whether he upheld his principles, even if he lost the day's skirmish. It's a unique upbringing, one that forges a particular kind of strength, a quiet internal resilience, like a carefully tempered blade. This isn't the flashy attention-grabbing strength of a gladiator, but the enduring strength of deep roots preparing you for storms you cannot yet fully comprehend, but instinctively feel, are gathering on the horizon. The faint scent of wood smoke from the kitchen, the rhythmic clack of a loom from another room, the serious cadence of your father's voice discussing matters of state and soul. These are the sensory anchors of a childhood where being good was a far more profound and perilous undertaking than just behaving yourself. The world of philosophical contemplation and observed political sparring you knew as a child inevitably gives way to a more direct personal involvement in the Republic's intricate dance of power and family. You are, after all, a daughter of Cato, a valuable piece on the chessboard of Roman alliances, and your marriage is not likely to be a mere affair of the heart, though affection might certainly grow. It's more akin to a strategic merger, a very serious lifelong networking event where the guest list is exclusively powerful and often dangerously ambitious men. And so you transition from Cato's daughter absorbing Stoic principles by the hearth to Portia, the wife expected to embody those principles in a new household, one that is also deeply enmeshed in the political fray. Your first husband is Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus. If that name rings a faint bell, it's because he's destined for a rather unenviable spot in the historical footnotes as Julius Caesar's consular colleague in 59 BCE. Colleague is perhaps too generous a term. Chief antagonist, or official speed bump, might be more accurate from Caesar's perspective. Bibulus, like your father, is a staunch optimate, a defender of the old republican ways, which makes this marriage an entirely logical, if not terribly romantic-sounding alliance. You are probably in your late teens, the typical age for a Roman girl of your class to marry, stepping into the role of matrona in a household that stands in direct opposition to the rising tide of Caesarian power. The quiet strength that tempered steel core, forged in Cato's home, is about to be tested in the crucible of Roman marriage and high-stakes politics. You are no longer just observing principles. You are expected to live them, to manage a household that is a political statement in itself, and to support a husband whose daily work involves trying to metaphorically, and sometimes almost literally, trip up one of the most formidable men in Roman history. Life with Bibulus during that infamous consulship must have been an exercise in Stoic endurance. This is a mainstream historical fact that sounds almost like a political satire. Caesar, with his popular support and sheer force of will, essentially sidelined Bibulus for much of their term. Bibulus and his supporters, including your father, would attempt to block Caesar's legislative agenda, often by declaring unfavorable omens. Picture this: Caesar is trying to pass land reforms or some other populist measure, and Bibulus, from the Roman equivalent of his home office, declares that the sacred chickens are having a bad feather day, or that he saw a particularly unpropitious cloud formation. It sounds faintly ridiculous to us now, like trying to stop a political rival by tweeting that Mercury is in retrograde. But these religious technicalities were, at least in theory, serious procedural tools. Caesar, however, was not one for being stymied by gloomy poultry. His supporters reportedly harassed Bibulus, dumped a rather unneighborly bucket of, well, let's just say, organic refuse over his head in the forum, and effectively confined him to his house for a good portion of the year. So while Caesar is out there conquering Gaul and charming the populace, your husband is in essence working from home, issuing daily bulletins of divine disapproval that Caesar's faction cheerfully ignores. You, Portia, are living through this. You're managing the household where this besieged consul resides. The tension must have been palpable, a constant thrum beneath the surface of daily life. Do you ensure the doors are securely barred? Do you listen with a knot in your stomach for the sounds of angry mobs? Do you offer quiet counsel to Bibulus, drawing on the lessons of resilience learned from Cato? The historical record, as is so often the case for women, is largely silent on your specific actions during these years. But it's in these undocumented moments, these daily navigations of fear and duty, that your quiet fortitude would have been your constant companion. You are not merely a spectator to your husband's political battles. You are intrinsically linked to his fate, your home a small fortified island of Republican sentiment in an increasingly hostile sea. It's an early and rather stark introduction to the personal costs of political conviction. Historians still argue whether the primary duty of a Republican wife in such tumultuous times was simply to maintain a calm domestic sphere and produce heirs for these important family lines, or if women like you, Portia, equipped with intelligence and an unparalleled education in principle, actively engaged in the political discourse and strategy within their family circles, their insights valued behind closed doors. Given your background, it's hard to imagine you simply arranging flowers while Rome burned. The Roman attitude towards marriage and lineage could be remarkably pragmatic, sometimes startlingly so, to our modern sensibilities. You might have heard whispers or even direct discussions about arrangements that seem utterly bizarre to us. There's a rather quirky tidbit involving your own family. Your father Cato at one point divorced his then-wife Marcia, your stepmother, so that she could marry his friend, the orator Hortensius, and bear Hortensius children, because Hortensius's own wife was unable to. After Hortensius died, Cato then remarried Marcia, now a wealthy widow. It sounds like a plot from a particularly complicated ancient soap opera, but it illustrates how lineage property and alliances could sometimes outweigh what we might consider personal romantic bonds, at least in the very public sphere of aristocratic marriages. It wasn't that affection didn't exist, but the dynastic and political considerations were paramount. This context of marital flexibility for strategic ends is part of the air you breathe, a reminder that family ties were threads in a much larger, more complex social and political fabric. Trying to map out these Roman family trees with all the adoptions, divorces, and remarriages for political or financial gain can sometimes feel like untangling a particularly stubborn bowl of spaghetti in the dark. Chaita, through these years with Bibulus, as you navigated the duties of a wife and the anxieties of a political target's spouse, that Stoic foundation from your youth must have been your anchor. The teachings of Zeno, the example of your father, the emphasis on inner control when external events are chaotic. These weren't just philosophical concepts. They were your daily toolkit for survival. You learned to present a calm demeanor, to manage your own fears, to uphold the dignity of your household, even when its master was being publicly humiliated or endangered. These early experiences, these first trials by political fire, are forging the Portia who will later face even greater storms. Her quiet strength isn't born in a single dramatic moment. It's accumulated layer by layer through years of steadfastly enduring, of being the calm center in a whirlwind of masculine ambition and conflict. You feel the fine wool of your stola against your skin, a familiar comfort, as you oversee the household slaves, ensuring the lentils are sorted. The linen is fresh, the accounts are in order, all while the fate of the Republic and your own small part in it hangs precariously in the balance, like a poorly balanced amphora on a wobbly shelf. The years pass, as they always do, even when each day feels freighted with the oppressive weight of a republic gasping for breath. Your first husband, Bibulus, eventually fades from the political stage, and then from life itself, passing away around 48 BCE, while commanding Pompey's fleet in the east during the civil war against Caesar. you find yourself a widow Portia, a position that in Roman society could offer a degree of independence, but also vulnerability. Yet you are Cato's daughter, a woman of known fortitude and significant lineage. It is unlikely you would remain unattached for long, especially with the political landscape still fractured and men seeking to shore up their alliances through marriage. And indeed, a new chapter and a far more historically resonant partnership awaits you. Around 45 BCE, you marry Marcus Junius Brutus. This isn't just a quiet remarriage to settle into a comfortable domesticity. It's a union that sends ripples through Rome's politically attuned society. For one thing, Brutus divorces his then-wife, Claudia Pulchra, to marry you. This causes something of a stir, as Claudia was apparently well regarded, and the move is seen by many as a deeply symbolic act. It's like a modern-day celebrity leaving a perfectly nice partner for someone who embodies a very specific, very public set of ideals, a political power couple in the making, but with more togas and considerably less Instagram. This marriage is a mainstream historical fact that signals a significant alignment. Brutus, who had once been pardoned by Caesar after fighting against him at Pharsalus, is now unmistakably tying his star to the legacy of Cato, your father, the ultimate martyr for the Republican cause. The political stakes, already high, are ratcheted up several more notches. You are no longer just navigating the periphery of political storms, as you did with Bibulus. You are now married to a man whose name and actions will soon be at the very eye of the hurricane. Brutus himself is a complex figure. He's known for his intellectual pursuits, his interest in philosophy, particularly Stoicism, though perhaps with a more academic leaning than your father's all-consuming practice. He's a man wrestling with his conscience, his heritage. He was, after all, descended from the Lucius Junius Brutus, who is said to have expelled the last king of Rome, and his relationship with Julius Caesar, who had shown him clemency and even in favor. Your marriage to him is seen by many as you, Portia, being the living embodiment of Cato's unyielding spirit, perhaps a constant quiet reminder to Brutus of where his true allegiances should lie. It's easy to imagine your conversations, not just the mundane domestic talk, but discussions steeped in shared philosophical principles. Plutarch, one of our key ancient sources, certainly paints a picture of a marriage with a deep intellectual and emotional connection. You are not just wife and husband. You are partners in a shared understanding of virtue, duty, and the perilous state of Roman liberty. Your household becomes a haven for these ideals, a place where perhaps the true meaning of being a Roman in the old republican sense is still fiercely cherished, even as Caesar's power solidifies into what looks increasingly like a monarchy. The air in Rome during this period is thick with unspoken fears and whispered anxieties. Caesar is now dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. The forms of the Republic remain like hollowed-out architectural shells, but the substance of its old freedoms is eroding with each passing day. For you and Brutus, this isn't just a political grievance. It's an existential threat to everything your families have stood for. The weight of your combined legacies is immense. He carries the burden of an ancestor who overthrew a tyrant. You carry the spirit of a father who chose death over submitting to one. It's a heavy mantle for any couple to bear, let alone one trying to carve out a personal life amidst such monumental public pressures. Historians still argue whether Brutus's decision to marry Portia was driven more by a profound personal connection and shared ideals, or if it was primarily a calculated political maneuver to signal his Catonian loyalties and consolidate support among the remaining optimates who were wary of Caesar's absolute power. Perhaps, as is so often the case with matters of the human heart and political ambition, it was an inseparable blend of both. Your father Cato, even in death, casts a long shadow, and his influence is a quirky, yet potent force in these years. After Cato's dramatic suicide in Utica in 46 BCE, rather than submit to Caesar's pardon, he became an almost mythical figure, a martyr, an icon of republican virtue. A kind of Cato fan club emerges with figures like Cicero and Brutus himself, writing eulogies and pamphlets praising his unwavering principles. Brutus penned a Cato that lauded your father's life and ideals. Caesar, ever sensitive to public opinion and clearly irked by this posthumous veneration of his old adversary, actually took the time to write his own response, a work known as the Anti-Cato, attempting to tarnish your father's image. Imagine that the most powerful man in the world, a victorious general and dictator, feeling the need to engage in a literary feud with a dead man. It shows the incredible symbolic power your father wielded, a power you as his daughter, and now Brutus's wife, carry forward. One can almost picture Brutus at home, muttering about needing to write an anti-Cato if Caesar decided to have another go. This intellectual sparring, this battle for the narrative of Roman virtue, is happening all around you, and your marriage is right at the heart of it. Life with Brutus in these tense, pre-Ides of March days must have been a careful balance. There would be the outward appearance of normalcy, managing the household, receiving guests, perhaps attending the carefully circumscribed social events still permitted. But beneath the surface, there's the shared philosophical understanding, the unspoken anxieties, and quite possibly the nascent dangerous ideas beginning to form in Brutus's mind and among his circle. You've had experience with a politically embattled husband before, remember with Bibulus, but this feels different, heavier. That was about opposition within a system that, however flawed, still somewhat functioned. Now the system itself seems broken, and the solutions being contemplated are far more drastic. You observe Brutus, see the conflict in his eyes, feel the oppressive quiet of a city waiting for something to break. Your Stoic training, your entire life's immersion in the principles of reason and resilience, are preparing you for a role you never sought, but may be uniquely qualified to undertake. The scent of beeswax from polished floors, the faint metallic tang of ink from freshly penned letters, the hushed cadence of late-night conversations drifting from Brutus's study. These are the subtle sensory details of a life lived on the precipice, a life where personal love and public duty are about to collide with earth-shattering force. The days leading up to what will become an infamous date in March are heavy with a tension that settles over your household like a fine, suffocating dust. You observe your husband Brutus, a man you know for his philosophical inclinations and his usually measured demeanor, now visibly wrestling with a profound inner turmoil. He's often preoccupied, his brow furrowed in thought, his sleep perhaps restless beside you. There are hushed, urgent meetings with men like Cassius, their faces grim, their departures late into the night, leaving an echo of unspoken gravity in the air. That stoic resilience honed since your childhood in Cato's presence, and further tested during your years with Bibulus, allows you to watch and wait with a composed exterior, but your intelligent mind, steeped in the political realities of Rome and the philosophical weight of your lineage, pieces together the alarming possibilities. Something dangerous is brewing, something that aims to strike at the very heart of Caesar's seemingly unshakable power. You are not content to be a mere bystander, a companion, for as Plutarch vividly records you saying, "bed and board only." You are Cato's daughter, Brutus's wife, a woman who believes herself a partner in spirit and intellect, not just in domesticity. And so you choose your moment to confront Brutus. You speak to him not with hysteria or accusation, but with the reasoned strength that is your birthright. You remind him of your shared commitment to the principles your father died for, of your own capacity for endurance. You articulate that deep-seated Roman ideal of a wife as a sharer in her husband's fortunes and counsels, good or ill. Yet Brutus, perhaps out of a desire to protect you, or maybe still bound by the conventional Roman view of women's roles, hesitates to unburden himself of the terrible secret he carries. He likely fears for your safety, for the consequences should such a plot be discovered, and questions, as many men of his time would, whether a woman could truly bear the weight of such knowledge without faltering. It is this doubt, this protective exclusion, that spurs you to an act so extraordinary. It has echoed down through history, a testament to your incredible resolve. This is the mainstream historical account, primarily from Plutarch, and it's quite a scene. To prove your fortitude, your ability to withstand pain and maintain silence, you decide on a drastic, almost unthinkable test. You dismiss your attendants, finding yourself alone in your chamber. There you take a small sharp knife. Some translations suggest a barber's knife or a little chisel, and you deliberately inflict a deep wound upon your own thigh. This isn't a fleeting scratch. It's a significant injury, one that causes considerable blood loss and intense pain. Proving your trustworthiness by self-injury. Probably not in any modern marriage counseling manual, but hey, these were decidedly different times, with very different ideas about demonstrating one's mettle. You then carefully conceal the wound, enduring the subsequent pain, the inevitable fever, the weakness, all without a word of complaint, without letting anyone, not even Brutus, know the cause of your sudden illness. For days you bear this secret agony. Every throb of pain in your leg, every wave of fever that washes over you becomes a silent argument for your strength, a fierce rebuttal to any notion that you are too fragile for the burdens of conspiracy. Finally, when you feel you have sufficiently demonstrated your capacity for silent suffering, for true Stoic endurance, you choose your moment to reveal your act to Brutus. Imagine the scene, the flickering lamplight of your private rooms, the heavy tapestries muffling the sounds of the city. You show him the now inflamed, angry wound, explaining calmly how and why you inflicted it upon yourself. You tell him that you wanted to test your own courage, to prove that your mind could master your body's agony, and by extension, that you were capable of sharing his heaviest secrets without breaking. It's like the most extreme trust fall imaginable, but with significantly more blood loss and a distinct lack of corporate facilitators holding a safety net. Brutus's reaction, as Plutarch tells it, is one of utter astonishment, rapidly followed by profound admiration, and no doubt a healthy dose of wow. I have seriously married up in the toughness department. He is deeply moved by your act, by this visceral proof of your unwavering spirit. Any lingering doubts about your ability to be his confidant are swept away. Lifting his hands to heaven, he is said to have prayed aloud that he might prove himself a husband worthy of such a wife. And then the floodgates open. He confides in you, completely revealing the full extent of the conspiracy, the names of those involved, and their desperate, audacious plan to assassinate Julius Caesar in the Senate House on the Ides of March. You have not only pierced your own flesh, but also the wall of secrecy around Brutus's heart and mind. This act of self-wounding is laden with meaning. It is a stark demonstration of the Stoic concept of apatheia. Not listless apathy, but a state of mind unperturbed by passion or pain, a mastery of the self. It's also a radical assertion for a Roman woman of her era, a direct claim to be an active participant in the dangerous high-stakes political world, typically reserved for men. The quirky, or rather grimly fascinating tidbit here is to consider the very real dangers of such an act in an age before antibiotics. A deep thigh wound could easily lead to a fatal infection. The fever you suffered was a clear sign of the body's distress. Historians still argue whether Porcia's act of self-wounding, so vividly described by Plutarch, was an entirely unique personal decision stemming from her extraordinary Stoic character and her father's unyielding example, or if it perhaps hinted at a more hidden tradition of female participation or symbolic acts of resolve within Roman political families, rituals that simply went largely unrecorded by male historians focused on male exploits. Was this a singular act of a phenomenal woman, or the tip of an iceberg of female fortitude we can no longer see? Regardless your bravery, your almost terrifying commitment to being Brutus's true partner has now made you an initiate into the heart of the storm. The theoretical discussions of virtue and tyranny are over. You are now bound to a secret that could save the Republic or destroy you all. The secret is now yours, a burning coal held tight within your breast. That wound on your thigh now, perhaps a dull, healing ache, is a constant physical reminder of the immense burden you've chosen to share with Brutus. The days leading up to the Ides of March stretch before you, each hour laden with a suffocating anxiety that even your formidable Stoic discipline struggles to keep entirely at bay. You are no longer just an observer of Rome's political tempests. You are an initiate, a silent partner in an act that will either be hailed as liberation or condemned as treason, with little room for anything in between. It's like waiting for the most terrifying exam results imaginable if the exam was titled, "Successfully Assassinate a Seemingly Invincible Dictator and Restore the Republic." And failing meant, well, let's just say it involved more than a sternly worded letter from the dean. You move through your days with a carefully constructed veneer of calm, overseeing the household, perhaps even engaging in the usual social niceties. But beneath the surface, your mind is a whirlwind. Every unexpected knock at the door, every unfamiliar voice in the atrium, every hurried messenger in the street could be the harbinger of discovery. The fear is not just for yourself, but overwhelmingly for Brutus and for the fate of the other conspirators, men who are risking everything on this single desperate gamble. You replay scenarios in your mind. Imagine the bloody chaos that might ensue, the potential for failure, the almost certain retribution if their plan goes awry. That carefully cultivated Stoic detachment, the ability to accept fate, is now locked in a fierce battle with the very human terror of what is to come. Sleep offers little respite, perhaps bringing fragmented dreams and a heart that pounds in the pre-dawn stillness. Then the morning of the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BCE, finally arrives. The city of Rome awakens largely oblivious to the fact that this day will be seared into history. But in your home, the air is electric with an almost unbearable tension. Plutarch, our faithful chronicler of these intimate historical moments, paints a vivid picture of your state. Despite all your resolve, despite the brutal proof of your fortitude, you inflicted upon yourself the immediate overwhelming pressure of the moment begins to unravel your composure. As Brutus prepares to depart for the Senate House, the planned site of the assassination, you are consumed by a terrible agitation. This isn't the controlled endurance of physical pain. This is the psychological torment of watching a loved one walk towards immense unknown danger while you are forced to wait helpless. You find yourself repeatedly questioning anyone who comes from the forum, sending messenger after messenger to the Senate to see if Brutus is safe to glean any scrap of news about what is happening. It's the ancient Roman equivalent of obsessively refreshing a news web page, or repeatedly calling a disconnected phone line, desperate for any update. Each passing moment without word stretches your nerves tighter. This is a mainstream historical fact. Portia's acute distress on the day itself is well documented by Plutarch, showcasing the immense emotional strain she was under. The Stoic ideal of ataraxia, or serene calmness, feels impossibly distant as the minutes crawl by. The sounds of the city, a distant cart rattling on the cobblestones, the murmur of voices from the street, all seem amplified, potentially masking the sounds of alarm or violence you dread to hear. At some point, the strain becomes too much. Your mind, overwrought with anxiety and terrible imaginings, can no longer sustain the facade of strength. You collapse, fainting dead away, much to the alarm of your attendants. The women of your household cry out, believing you to be dying. The news of your sudden alarming illness spreads rapidly, a ripple of domestic panic that eventually reaches Brutus himself, already stationed with his fellow conspirators in the tense, charged atmosphere near Pompey's theater, where the Senate was meeting. Imagine his state of mind, steeling himself for an act of political murder, surrounded by men whose nerves are likely just as frayed, and then receiving word that his beloved wife, his brave Portia, has collapsed and is perhaps near death. It's a stark reminder of the personal human cost intertwined with these monumental, history-altering events. Even Stoics, it seems, were not entirely immune to a good old-fashioned stress feint when the stakes involved the potential collapse of their world and the violent death of their spouse. The broader atmosphere in Rome on that day would have only amplified your personal terror. It was a time when omens and portents were taken with deadly seriousness by many. Caesar himself had famously been warned by the soothsayer Spurina to beware the Ides of March. His wife Calpurnia had reportedly been plagued by terrible dreams the night before, begging him not to attend the Senate. This quirky tidbit about the pervasive belief in omens meant the air itself must have felt thick with foreboding, not just for those in on the secret, but for anyone attuned to the superstitious undercurrents of Roman life. The conspirators, too, were likely on high alert for any ill omens, interpreting every stray bird or stumbled step as a possible sign from the gods. For you, Portia, every shadow, every unexpected silence could have felt like a confirmation of your deepest fears. Historians still argue about the extent to which the conspirators, including Brutus, truly believed they could neatly excise Caesar and magically restore the old republic, or if some, perhaps Brutus himself, harbored deeper anxieties about the systemic rot that might lead to further civil war, regardless of their actions. This profound uncertainty about the future, even if their desperate acts succeeded, would have added another layer to the crushing weight of your anxiety, a fear not just for the day, but for all the days to come. The fate of Rome, the life of your husband, your own future, all hang precariously in the balance, like the gladiator's net, moments before it's cast. The city outside your walls is a confused sea of rumor and uncertainty. The news of Caesar's assassination, when it finally filters through to you, confirmed and undeniable, must bring a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. There's the sharp metallic taste of a grim kind of victory. The tyrant is dead, but immediately treading on its heels is a profound dread for what comes next, for Brutus, for Rome itself. The conspirators, initially hoping to be hailed as liberators, soon find the Roman crowd expertly swayed by Mark Antony's funeral oration for Caesar turning against them. The dream of a restored republic, purchased with blood, begins to crumble almost as soon as it's declared. Brutus and Cassius, along with the other assassins, are forced to flee Rome. Then Italy, their status shifting from would-be saviors to hunted men. Your farewell to Brutus is a moment steeped in the poignant awareness that it might be your last. Plutarch tells us that you accompanied him to the coast, trying with all your Stoic might to maintain composure, to be the strong Roman matron, Cato's daughter worthy of your husband. Yet even your formidable control has its limits. It's a mainstream historical fact, or at least a deeply ingrained part of Portia's story via Plutarch, that your resolve finally broke upon seeing a painting depicting the farewell of Hector and Andromache. That classic heartbreaking scene of a warrior leaving his beloved wife for a battle he will not survive. The image mirroring your own unbearable reality overwhelmed you, and you wept. Brutus, deeply moved, still had to depart, leaving you in an increasingly hostile land, a beacon of his cause, and a target for his enemies. Your family gatherings, it must be said, seem to have had an unusually high martyrdom rate, even for politically active Romans. Life in the months that follow is a torment of waiting. News from the east, where Brutus and Cassius are attempting to rally forces against Antony, and Octavian travels excruciatingly slowly, filtered through unreliable sources. Each report, each letter that might arrive after weeks or months on the road carries the potential for elation or utter devastation. You are surrounded by the whispers of your enemies and the anxious hopes of your few remaining allies. That strength you demonstrated with the self-inflicted wound is now called upon daily, not for a single act of defiance, but for the prolonged gnawing endurance of uncertainty and fear for Brutus. Then, in 42 BCE, the catastrophic news arrives, the Battle of Philippi. Brutus's forces are defeated. Cassius is dead. And then the final crushing blow, Brutus himself has taken his own life, choosing death over capture, following the grim example of your father Cato. The storm you sensed gathering the storm you prepared for has finally broken with all its devastating fury, and it has swept away the man who was the center of your world. What happens next to you, Portia, is shrouded in some historical debate, though the most dramatic and enduring story is one of tragic Stoic defiance. According to several ancient sources overwhelmed by grief and determined not to outlive Brutus in a world now controlled by his enemies, you resolve to end your own life. The most famous version, though also the most contested, claims that your friends, fearing your intent, removed all weapons from your reach. Undeterred, you supposedly snatched live glowing coals from a brazier and forced them into your mouth, dying by suffocation or internal burns. It's a horrifying image, and definitely not a recommended coping mechanism, though it certainly crafts a memorable and defiant historical exit. Historians still argue vehemently about the exact circumstances of Portia's death. While the story of swallowing hot coals is dramatic and has captured the imagination for centuries, many scholars question its literal truth. They suggest it might be a later embellishment, a symbolic tale designed to emphasize your unwavering Stoic resolve and create a death that mirrored the fiery intensity of your spirit, perhaps even echoing your father's determined and painful end. More plausible, though less sensational, theories suggest you might have died by inhaling charcoal fumes in a sealed room, a common method of suicide in antiquity, or even succumbed to a prolonged illness brought on by grief and stress. The quirky, or perhaps just grim tidbit here is how artistic and literary representations through the ages have seized upon the hot coals story, cementing it in popular culture, despite the historical uncertainties. Shakespeare, for instance, in Julius Caesar, has Portia die from anxiety before Philippi, though he does mention her swallowing fire. Regardless of the precise method, your death occurring likely in late 42 or early 41 BCE marked the end of a life lived with extraordinary intensity and principle. Your name, Porcia Catonis, daughter of Cato, wife of Brutus, became synonymous with female Stoic virtue, unwavering courage, and profound wifely devotion. You stood as an emblem of the dying Republican ideals, a testament to a spirit that refused to bend to tyranny, even when all was lost. The whispers of your final defiant act, whether wholly factual or partly legend, only served to magnify your legacy, ensuring you would be remembered not merely as an attachment to famous men, but as a formidable character in your own right. A quiet burning ember of fortitude against the encroaching darkness. And so, as the last echoes of Portia's story fade into the quiet of the night, we find ourselves at the gentle end of our journey this evening. The sounds of ancient Rome, the clash of ambition, the fervent whispers of philosophy, the profound and personal pains of loss and resolve all begin to soften, to recede like a distant tide under a sky full of slumbering stars. Portia's world, with its stark choices and its immense pressures, feels so very far from our own, and yet the quiet strength she sought, the resilience she embodied in her own fierce and determined way, touches something timeless within the human spirit. The burdens she carried were heavy, the storms she faced immense, but in the recounting of her days, perhaps we find a small, peaceful space to appreciate the endurance of the human heart. Let the tease of old Rome of steadfastness and starlight now gently dissolve. Allow your thoughts to drift unburdened like a small boat on a calm, moonlit sea. There is nothing more to learn tonight, nothing more to ponder. Only the gentle cadence of breath, the soft comfort of your surroundings, and the deep welcoming quiet of the approaching sleep. Rest now, let the peace of the ages settle over you, and may your dreams be tranquil and kind.